Hi, you right? Welcome to Explorations in Evil and Eccentricity. So first we'll start off with a daily review. 4 questions there. What I'd like you to do is I would like you to pause the video here and have a go at answering those questions. Good luck. Okay, let's go through the answers. So which duality does Stevenson explore through Jekyll and Hyde? And it's a duality of good and evil within human. Which character is a manifestation of man's capacity for evil? The answer is Mr. Hyde. Why might writers in the 19th century have been interested in the dichotomy between good and evil? Because of the deep poverty and rapid advancements in science and technology, writers began to question what it truly meant to be evil. If you call someone a Jekyll and Hyde, what would that suggest about them? They have 2 very different sides to their character. Okay, so moving on, we're still focusing on the Jekyll and Hyde, fantastic story from the 19th century. Just remember, Stevenson kind of perceives Mr. Hyde as the manifestation, i.e. the physical version of the evil that Stevenson suggests lurks within humanity, the capacity to do evil things. So big question, how does the writer use language to convey the evil of the character? Okay, first of all, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to copy the word and the definition and the example in your books, please. The word is mercurial. As you may have guessed, it links to the idea of the planet Mercury as well, and the Roman gold. So characterized by rapid and unpredictable changeableness of mood. So you could say the mercurial man's face twisted from a friendly smile to a sinister look of rage. Can you write your own sentence about Dr. Jekyll, including the adjective mercurial? Okay. So today's extract describes one of Hyde's crimes. So I'm sitting on a very creaky chair. Okay, so I'm going to read you the extract now, and there will be a few comprehension questions afterwards. Well, it was this way, returned Mr. Enfield. I was coming home from someplace at the end of the world about 3 o'clock of a black winter morning, and my way lay through a part of town where there was literally nothing to be seen but lamps. Street after street, and all the folks asleep. Street after street, all lighted up as if for a procession, and all as empty as a church. Till at last I got into that state of mind when a man listens and listens and begins to long for the sight of a policeman. All at once I saw 2 figures. One a little man who was stumping along eastward at a good walk, and the other a girl of maybe 8 or 10 who was running as hard as she was able down a cross street. Well, sir, the 2 ran into one another naturally enough at the corner, and then came the horrible part of the thing. For the man trampled calmly over the child's body and left her screaming on the ground. It sounds nothing to hear, but it was hellish to see. It wasn't like a man. It was like some damned juggernaut. I gave a view, hallo, tucked to my heels, collared my gentleman, and brought him back to where there was already quite a group about the screaming child. He was perfectly cool and made no resistance, but gave me one look so ugly that it brought out the sweat on me like running. The people who had turned out were the girl's own family, and pretty soon the doctor, for whom she had been sent, put in his appearance. Well, the child was not much the worse, more frightened according to the sawbones, and there you might have supposed would be an end to it. But there was one curious circumstance. I had taken a loathing to my gentleman at first sight. So had the child's family, which was only natural, but the doctor's case was what struck me. He was the usual cut-and-dry apothecary, of no particular age and colour, with a strong Edinburgh accent, and about as emotional as a bagpipe. Well, sir, he was like the rest of us. Every time he looked at my prisoner, I saw that Sawbones turn sick and white with the desire to kill him. I knew what was in his mind, just as he knew what was in mine, and killing being out of the question, we did the next best. We told the man we could and would make such a scandal out of this as should make his name stink from one end of London to the other. If he had any friends or any credit, we undertook that he should lose them. And all the time as we were pitching at him red hot, we were keeping the women off him as best we could, for they were as wild as harpies. I never saw a circle of such hateful faces. And there was the man in the middle, with a kind of black sneering coolness, frightened too, I could see that, but carrying it off, sir, really like Satan. Mr. Utterson stepped out and touched him on the shoulder as he passed. Mr. Hyde, I think? Mr. Hyde shrank back with a hissing intake of breath, but his fear was only momentary, and though he did not look the lawyer in the face, he answered coolly enough, "That is my name. What do you want?" Mr. Hyde was pale and dwarfish. He gave an impression of deformity without any nameable malformation. He had a displeasing smile. He had borne himself to the lawyer with a sort of murderous mixture of timidity and boldness, and he spoke with a husky whispering and somewhat broken voice. All these were the points against him, but not all of these together could explain the hitherto unknown disgust, loathing, and fear with which Mr. Utterson regarded him. Okay, so quite a complex extract there. What I'd like you to do is, using the Word document that I've attached to show my homework, you can either highlight, underline, and annotate the text of your answers to the questions below, or if you're handwriting your notes, or if you just prefer, then just write your answers to the questions below. Okay? Where was Mr. Enfield? Underline the puddle of text that lets you know this. What time of day was it? How does it add to the atmosphere of what you were reading? Mr. Enfield encountered two people. Circle the phrases used to describe who he saw. Underline the noun phrase damn juggernaut. Annotate the definition huge, powerful, and overwhelming force. When confronted, how did Mr. Hyde react? Underline the words and phrases that let you know. Underline the simile, emotional as a bagpipe. What does this mean? Annotate harpies. And add monsters from Greek mythology, half human, half bird, animals of torture. Okay, what's telling here is the reaction of them to it. So pause the video now and open up the Word document and either annotate it and save it, ready to submit to your teacher at the end of this lesson itself, or annotate it, or handwrite your answers to the questions in your notes. Okay. Okay, the answers. So it was 3 AM. It was the middle of the night, which conveys a much more sinister atmosphere. The two people, a little man, a girl of maybe 8. When confronted, how did he react? Good quote to convey this is Mr. Hyde shrank back with a hissing intake of the breath, but his fear was only momentary, and though he did not look the lawyer in the face, he answered coolly enough. Underline the simile, emotional as a bagpipe. What does this mean? He was usually cool and emotionless, like an inanimate object. So what's telling about that is the doctor's strong reaction, considering he's normally cool and collected. Okay, so you could of course have annotated something else about Mr. Hyde's reaction as well. You could have highlighted this bit here, and that would count as well. Man in the middle with a kind of black sneering coolness, frightened too, I could see that, but carrying an officer really like Satan. That would equally count as an answer to that question, because there were 2 moments of reaction there. So what do you notice about the use of setting? Why has the writer chosen to include this detail? And what are your impressions of the character of Hyde and why? Okay, so just think about those. Think about how the setting and the time of night and contribute to this view we've got of this emerging view of Mr. Hyde himself. Okay, so annotate your text with the ways that the writer has conveyed the evilness of Hyde. So what I'd like you to do is go back to that Word document now, or add a list of the words or phrases. So words that create a lexical field linked to the devil, so that means words that you would associate with the devil. Verbs that suggest the violence of Mr. Hyde's actions. Adverbs that suggest he doesn't care about the harm he causes. A noun phrase that uses language with connotations of snakes. Words that create a lexical field of hatred, so words we associate with the idea of hatred itself. And similes that compare Hyde to scary things. Okay, good luck. Okay, so thinking about connotations. So these are the extra meanings and emotions that we associate with language beyond the literal definition, and one has used these to create layers of meaning. So what you need to think about when you're zooming into language and considering words or comparisons that writers make is what are the connotations of the word? What emotional response does it conjure up? But a more important one in terms of developing understanding is to think about why. Why do you associate this emotional meaning with the word? How has the writer manipulated the connotations of this word to add meaning? So my turn. So my quote is going to be with a hissing intake of breath. What are the connotations of that word? I'll say that suggests he is a dangerous or unpleasant character. Then I'm going to think about why. Because it has animalistic language, which conjures up the image of serpents and snakes for the reader. And these are commonly associated with ideas like poison, viciousness, and evil. Okay? And now I'm going to think about our big question. How can I take my knowledge there that I've done with the annotation of that quote to write a reasonable paragraph that analyzes it? This is how I'd go about it. The writer has used language to create the impression that the character is unpleasant and sinister. The sensory detail with the hissing intake of breath conveys connotations of danger because the animalistic language conjures up an image of serpents and snakes for the reader, which are commonly associated with poison and viciousness, which makes the reader feel afraid and anxious of this sinister creature. So notice I've thought about the what and the why as a way to develop my understanding here itself. I'm really delving into language here, which is showing much deeper understanding of what the writer is trying to convey. So it's over to you now. Write down this quote: "The man trampled calmly over the child's body." Think about one word or two words in that quote. What are the connotations of that word? What do they suggest? And why do you think the writer has chosen them? Okay. To me, there's a stark contrast between the two. The fact that you could trample over a child's body calmly is quite telling. Yeah. Alright, so now your final thing is to copy and complete those sentence stems. You'll notice they're very similar to the ones I used earlier on with a hissing intake of breath. To answer that question, how does the writer use language to convey the evil of the character? So I'd like you to copy and complete those sentence stems. Okay? And then after you've done that, submit all your notes across to your teacher, let them have a look at them and give you a bit of feedback or recognise the good work that you've done there. Okay? Good luck!